Hello and welcome to the very first episode of Conversational podcast. This is a brand new podcast. My name's Louis. I will be hosting this podcast with my brilliant co-host, Erin, who's here today with me.
Hi, I'm very happy to be here. It's really exciting. It's a really exciting project, I think. So we're looking forward to get stuck in and sharing some really fabulous stories of some really distinguished guests who are both famous faces and not.
It is very exciting. Yes, we'll be taking our guests through from their childhood all the way up to where they are now and finding out what they're up to and learning their stories really and how they've grown as an individual throughout their careers and lives. Just for a bit of context, my name is Louis. As I've mentioned, I have been broadcasting, interviewing, presenting and public speaking since the age of 15. So without further ado, we are going to hand over to ourselves to introduce you to today's guest. Hello everybody and welcome back to Conversational, the podcast. I'm very, very excited to introduce our guest today. She's an actress you may recognise from Doctor Who, Coronation Street or her many theatre projects, who has travelled the world treading the boards. Please welcome Jacqueline King.
That's very kind of you. Thank you, Louis. Hi.
So first things first, tell us a little bit about yourself, you know, your name, what you do, where you're based.
My professional name is Jacqueline, but I always feel that when people call me that, I'm a little bit in trouble. So I go by the name of Jax. Pretty much everyone knows me by that. I'm based in southwest London, but originated in Northumberland. So I've come a long way.
Well, excellent. Yes. Well, we always start our podcast with the same question. It's just a bit of fun, really, but I think it's quite useful in. It tells you a lot about a person, the way they answer questions, especially simple questions. So we'd like to know your 5 dream dinner guests.
Oh gosh, wasn't ready for that. Oh crumbs! Everyone always says Nelson Mandela, don't they? So I'm not going to say him because obviously he would be divine and interesting and gorgeous and amazing. But I would rather think of 5 more interesting, 5 more different names. Well, this really is hard, Louis. You've thrown me.
It does throw people.
It does, because you know, do you keep it to people that you know and respect and love in your own circle, or do you invite people who you've admired from afar? Obviously, David Attenborough would be there. You know, these are the obvious ones of the people who've influenced the world. But if it's a dinner party guest, then I think, you know, I want to have fun and I want people to be talkative, and I would like them to keep the conversation flowing in a beautiful and fascinating way. And if for the rest of their lives they're saving the planet or doing something extraordinary, all power to them. But they have to be a damn good dinner guest. There's a million people I admire. It's so hard to single people out. Oh, it's impossible. It's impossible. I think I was brought up with the maxim that if you admire someone, you have to sort of always put things in context. So you never have to, in order not to envy anybody else, you have to want to swap lives with them. That was the advice I was given. And I don't want to swap lives with anybody. I've been, you know, so lucky and swapping lives means swapping your friends, swapping your husband, your family, and I don't want to swap any of that. So my real life friends will be wonderful dinner guests. Thank you very much. And I'll admire everybody else from afar.
That's a really nice response, actually. I think most people sort of go, who are the 5 people that I would want to meet for the first time the most? Whereas it's quite nice. What sort of dinner party would I actually enjoy? And I think having sort of friends and family there that you actually do know, you have time, and that would have a good time together is probably a far better way of looking at it.
I think you're the first person that we're going to let pass on that question, actually, just based on that lovely answer. So, I mean, moving on from the 5 dinner guest questions, unless you want to throw, you know, a name out there off the top of your head. No, okay. I want to take it back to the beginning, actually. What was your childhood like, and what did you kind of want to do with your life at a young age?
Oh gosh, I would say a very happy childhood. Brought up in Northumberland, which was the ideal place to grow up because we had beaches to just run around in and unspoilt. The Northumbrian beaches are stunning. I shouldn't be telling you this because we always were told, keep it a secret, don't tell anyone, and then it'll stay unspoilt. And I swam in the North Sea on a regular basis, and a good load of friends, yeah, a very happy childhood. I think being the youngest of 4 children means that you have hard acts to follow, and they had all done very well in their own ways, and I guess I was struggling to find what would be my niche. My sister had covered pretty much everything. She was really bright academically, and she was head girl and very attractive and all these sort of things. I thought, crumbs, well, I don't fall into any of those categories. And then I just remember very clearly in junior school playing the Mad Hatter in Alice in Wonderland, and everybody started laughing. And of course, that was just infectious. That was just totally addictive. I thought, oh, I love making people laugh. And so I knew pretty much from that moment. It sounds silly, but I think I knew then that's what I wanted to do.
Were you in lots of school productions throughout your childhood then? Was it kind of something you took?
Yes, yes, I was at an all-girls school. So originally playing a lot of men.
We've all been there.
I took my grade 8 elocution and drama exam, and I got lovely marks for it, which was very nice. But the comment in the corner was very surprised to see that you were playing a man. I had just got into the habit of I didn't know how to be a woman. And until I was about 16, where at last we had a wonderful teacher, Sue Saunders, must give her credit, she was amazing, and she came up with the original idea of why don't we ask the boys' school opposite to come in and play the male roles, and at last I got to be Abigail. I got to be
What a genius idea.
I know, who would have thought of something so radical?
We have this conversation a lot, actually, myself and Erin. We talk about inspirational teachers, because myself and Erin both had that one teacher who really had a big impact on our lives. I mean, I had a teacher who I kind of credit with getting me to where I am today because of the faith that she showed in me. Was she a big part of your life, Sue Saunders?
Yes, very much. Yes, very much. She recognised that I was failing quite badly academically. It was a combination of not applying myself, and I was swimming 3 times a day. I was a national swimmer, so I was training in the morning before school. I had I can't remember how long the journey was, but it was something like a 40-minute bus journey to school. So I would try very hard to do homework on the bus, but I pretty much fell asleep. And then at lunchtime, I'd run and swim at the school opposite this boys' school again. And then I'd swim in the evenings. So very little time for homework. And so I'm afraid I was appalling one year and failed most of my exams. And so this teacher recognized that wasn't going to go well unless I got a little bit of extra help. And so she stuck in there and said, well, why don't you leave at 16 and go to a tech college in Durham, where they're doing a thing called a drama A-level, which was unheard of at that time. They were one of the first places to offer that. And so that was really exciting. And so suddenly, having felt like a bit of a failure at school, not unhappy necessarily, but just feeling an academic failure, I went to take my A-levels at Durham Tech, and as I said, did the drama A-level along with that. And of course, that gave me the confidence to feel, well, I'm succeeding at something. And at last you begin to feel, oh, I'm not quite so stupid as I thought I was. And,
it is interesting that
well.
the school system that we have sort of tries to force people into an academic box when it's not for everyone. And if it's not for you, it can be extremely demoralizing. So trying to measure people against standard that they're actually good at and feel like they can succeed gives people a lot more confidence.
Yes, you know, you're going to encourage children from a young age to feel good and confident about themselves, and it's not based on anything but their personality and their presence and their imaginations.
Mm.
Do you think it's important, Jax, for young people to find something that they're really good at, or not even really good at, but just really enjoy, to kind of funnel their attention into?
Somebody came up with a wonderful theory ages ago, and I can't remember who it was. That we should be offered tokens, education tokens, and we can use them at any stage that we want. So say, for instance, we're automatically given 10 years schooling from 5 to 18, then you're given 10 tokens. So you can use those tokens. So you can stop using your tokens at, let's say you have to stay till you're 14, something like that. And then at 14, save those tokens for when you know what you want to do, and when you know what fascinates you and what interests you, and then cash them in then. and it'll be so much more focused and so much more full of energy and excitement, because you're doing something you've discovered yourself.
It is a brilliant idea, because I think lots of people, it's more similar to what they do in Germany, which is that at 14, you're given different options of going to technical college or continuing with formal education. And I think that's a far better way of allowing people the option to go, no, academics actually isn't for me, and I'm good at something else, and I'm going to employ my talents elsewhere because that's going to set me on a path that's more likely to lead to success. And I think that's far more sensible. Than forcing people down the university track. Like Tony Blair picked an arbitrary number of 50% of students should go to university, and it's totally arbitrary, and it forces people down a path that isn't for them and puts them in a hell of a lot of debt for no real reason.
Exactly. Yes, let's not forget the debt.
Yeah. I think there does need to be a radical change in the way that we approach education and how we value a degree as a culture above everything else. And I do think that's problematic. I mean, Louis has actively chosen not to go to university and chosen to get involved in his career instead, which I think is a radical choice when you're in a culture that sort of forces you down that track by rote. So I think that's quite brave in many ways.
Yeah, it felt like a bigger choice than it was really for me. When I left school 2 years ago, it was very much a case of which university are you going to, rather than do you want to go to university. I was never asked, do you want to go to university? It was, which university do you want to go to? And I was one of maybe 2 people who didn't go to university. And it felt like a massive deal. And even the year after, my sister's still at the school that I went to, one of the deputy heads went up to her and said, tell him he's throwing his life away by not going to university. Yeah.
Oh, Louis, how awful to have somebody say that. That's just appalling. That's appalling. Well, good on you for knowing what you wanted to do, and look at you, you're doing great. So may it long continue, and never feel that you have a chip on your shoulder of not going, and B, never feel that it's too late later on. You know, if you change your mind and you want to study something, there's open university courses, there's all sorts of things. There's options. We don't have to set ourselves in any sort of furrow, do we?
No.
That's the beautiful thing about the modern era. My granddad went to university when he was 70. He studied arts and literature. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Wow.
I wonder if and I'd be interested to get your thoughts on this. I wonder if the box filling, so to speak, of choose your career now starts even earlier than university, because you know, you pick your GCSE options at 14, 15, and you know, say you don't pick geography, for example, and then you decide when you get to 20 years old, oh, actually, I'm really interested in geography. Could I not? But then you can't, because you haven't done it for GCSE, you haven't got an A level, you can't then take it as a degree, and it starts really early.
Yes, you're right. And then, but there were options for me, but it became a lucky talisman. I failed, to my shame, my French O level, and I was so mortified by that, because I love the French language and I love the French and I love the country, and I thought, well, no, I really do want to learn. So I kept enrolling in a class, and I was lucky enough that, you know, living in London at that point, there were available courses, and so I thought, great, I'll enroll. And every time I did, I got a job. And I wasn't, so it became a lucky little sort of thing of, ooh, now if I enroll in a French class, maybe I'll get a job. so sadly, my French is lacking, but the career was okay.
I mean, just going back to something you said earlier, you said you're a fantastic swimmer at national level. Why
Oh, I never said I was fantastic.
You said you're a swimmer at national level then, in that case.
Yes.
Why acting and not swimming?
Oh, well, again, these people that influence you. I had a wonderful physiotherapist called Dr. Fleer. I think I'm getting that right. We're going back to, age-old time. And he took me to one side and said, look, Jax, you are failing miserably at school. And so you've got options here. You can carry on training. And really, you'd have to not only get into the Olympics, but you'd have to get into the final. And you'd pretty much have to win gold, silver or bronze for anybody to take any notice of you after that, unless you're just doing it for yourself. But if you want, recognition or backing, that's pretty much, we know this to be true. We know that we're looking at swimmers today, and we can only mention the people who have won medals. So the people who slog it out and the people who work their socks off and train morning, noon, at night and don't even get into the Olympics, obviously, I never heard of again. And so he just told me to take along, and he very sweetly and kindly, I can't remember how he phrased it, but he did sort of say I didn't really stand a chance of winning a gold medal. He knew I'm sure he didn't say it quite so bluntly, but the odds weren't great that I was going to be that good. And in the end, I didn't even get the qualifying time. I was 0.25 of a second. Which sounds minuscule, but actually in swimming world, that's quite a lot of swimmers between me and the last entrance. So I didn't even get in. And at that point, I just thought, yeah, now it's much more sensible to just try and get some qualifications. I did start going to school properly, learning a little bit.
I mean, in a way, thank goodness he said that to you. Get you to where you are now.
Yeah, and now I can love swimming now. It took me a while because I just thought, I don't know how to enjoy swimming without training.
Well, I mean, I'm going to jump forward a few years now in your life. I read that after school, you performed in, I'm going to try and get this right, Africa, Canada, America, Sri Lanka, and the United Arab Emirates. Am I missing any there?
And no, I haven't been keeping a list in my head, but that sounds about right. Yes. There was a sort of succession of jobs that all took me abroad. It was a good and a bad thing. Obviously, for the experience, it was fascinating. I loved it. But for my career, it wasn't so good because people had never heard of me back here. I was spending a lot of time abroad working, and yeah, I mean, I remember when I worked at the National. One of the people who worked there said, "But I've never heard of you." Yeah, but that's what happens. You've really got to sort of concentrate on your home crowd if you're going to build up a name. And I wasn't thinking of building up a name. I was just thinking of let's go where the jobs are. And they were fascinating jobs. I mean, there's a variety you mentioned there. I can't remember what order they came in. One was a dear friend who has died, sadly, Alistair Cameron, who ran a theatre company that took us to the United Arab Emirates and Sri Lanka. And that was a glorious tour of an Alan Ayckbourn play. And we couldn't have loved it more. And I had, do you want to hear my Alan Ayckbourn story?
Of course. Of course we do. This is a man that you mention a lot, actually. I've read a couple of interviews in preparation. Is he a good friend of yours?
Oh, I would never dare say a friend because I hold him in too much awe. But I've known him for quite a long time now, and I love him very much. He was virtually the first letter I wrote, having left theatre school. Actually, I was still at theatre school. I went to Bristol Old Vic Theatre School, and just about to finish. And my first letter was to him saying, "Please, can I join your company or audition at least?" And it was back in the day where there were only 2 equity cards allocated to each repertory company. And you couldn't become an actor unless you got an equity card. So it was that catch-22 situation. So I wrote and didn't hear back, and it was towards the end of my time in Bristol, so I moved to London. And finally, I received a letter forwarded to me in London that had been forwarded too late by the person in Bristol, saying, yes, we'd like to offer you a place. Oh, sorry, I've missed out the bit where I did have an audition. Sorry, I did have the audition. So I was too late. So I rang him in tears saying, I've only just got your letter. And he said, well, darling, there's nothing I can do because obviously I've filled that slot and we'll have to wait till next year. So the next year came, and he'd written a play about a girl who sang really badly and who thought she could sing really well. And I didn't sing well enough to be able to sing off key, if you see what I mean. I'm not a good singer, but I couldn't intentionally do an off key. So I couldn't play that role. So we forward another year, and I can't remember. It went on for years. And I kept in contact with him, but I just lost faith that I was ever going to work with him. And fast forward 18 years. 18 years. Wow. And meanwhile, of course, I'd done the job in Sri Lanka. And every time I did an Ayckbourn play, I would always write to him and say, I'm doing one of yours. And finally, 18 years later, I got to work with him. And then I had a lovely run with him where I stayed for quite a few plays for quite a few years, and two of which ended up in the West End. So that was just amazing. Yeah.
Was that a bit of a kind of pinch me moment working with someone that you've been trying to get in with for 18 years?
I've got shivers talking about it. I mean, genuinely, I could not believe my luck. I was just standing there working with him, thinking I'm working with this man who I've idolized and worshipped from afar, and here I am in the same room as him. I couldn't believe it. And then it just, the story just got more and more exciting because, as I say, I did all those jobs. I can't remember now. It was something like sort of 5 years I was up there on and off. This is in Scarborough. And at the time, when his plays transferred to London, at the time, very, very seldom did anybody go with it. It was always filled with stars when they arrive in London. Fair enough, nobody complained about that. But on this one occasion, the play was comic potential, and he had a superb actress in Janie D playing the lead role, and there was no question of her being replaced. She was stunning. But sadly, my husband was replaced because Keith and I had the great fortune of working together up in Scarborough. Anyway, we went into town, and that was lovely. But there was only maybe 3 or 4 of us had stayed from the original cast. Fast forward another couple of years, and he wrote 2 plays in a sequence of plays called Damsels in Distress. And he'd written 2 called Game Plan and Flat Spin. And while we were rehearsing, he got excited about the 7 of us. Michael Billington he was the reviewer at The Guardian, had labelled us the Magnificent 7. And so Alan got excited and said, right, I'm writing a 3rd one. It's going to be a trilogy, and it's written for you guys. And so never, ever had he written a play knowing exactly who all 7 characters were going to be played by. And so, just the honour of having a play written with you in mind was just terrific. And they ended up in the West End as well, and all 7 of us went with it.
What an achievement. Wow. I mean, I'd like to ask something based on something you said there, actually. I know you said you've done a few plays with your husband, and I think if my research is correct, you also did a sort of TV movie, Desperate Crossing, The Untold Story of the Mayflower, with him.
Right.
What's it like working with someone in your family?
Oh God, it was bliss. It was bliss. On that occasion, he's gone, so I don't have to be polite. He's not standing over there. At the time, Keith had worked for that company before, and it was a long time out in America filming a play about Hudson. And the director had said, Keith, I'd love you to come back and do this play about the Pilgrim Fathers arriving in America. This film, sorry, not play, film. And Keith was humming and hawing because it was going to be a long time out in America again. And he was wondering about it. And so because she knew him and because she liked his work very much and she wanted him in it, she said, well, what if I found a part for your wife? So really, I was, glorified third bonnet on the left. I was, I was his wife in the film. So it sounded good that we played husband and wife, but really he was a main character and I was very much in the background. But it meant that we had all those months out in America together, which was just fabulous. Coinciding with Hurricane Katrina. And we're supposed to,
yeah, not so lovely.
No, exactly. We're supposed to be filming on a replica of the Mayflower out at sea. Whoa! So not a lot of filming went on, and so a lot of the time we were given, poor us, we were given a car, and we were given a cabin in Maine to stay in.
Oh no!
And by a lake. Oh God,
sounds awful.
I know, someone had to do it. So yeah, that's what we did. A lot of the time stayed there, and then we explored all 13 states going down the east.
Oh, no.
Tough time.
Odd life of an actor.
I don't know how you cope.
I'd love to do a play in America, only because I've been told how extraordinary the audiences are, that they get up on their feet and whoop and laud you, even if they've hated it. I just want to know, what does that feel like? Whereas dear British audiences, of whom, I just think are marvellous, and if they stood up, you'd know, wouldn't you, that you're in a damn fire hit and you've struck a chord. And so I respect the fact that they will sit on their bums until we've drawn blood.
I'm just going to go back as well, just while we're on the topic of countries, to your experiences with the United Arab Emirates, because I mentioned to you sort of in the build up to this that I spent a month in Qatar over the past month, which is not dissimilar to some of the cities and places in the UAE. No. What sort of years was it that you were in the United Arab Emirates? Because it's very much a developing country, sort of even now.
Yes, exactly. I'd love to know more about you, Louis, and what you were doing there. What were you doing there?
So we were making a documentary there. I work in TV. So we were making a documentary sort of in preparation for the World Cup. Beautiful, beautiful country. Really, really, I actually think sort of misinterpreted by a lot of people. Based on what I saw. Obviously, it's not perfect. There are a lot of stories that we sort of won't go into, but it is really, really misinterpreted in my opinion. So what was your sort of experience with that sort of area of the world?
Well, with the UAE, I at the time, I'm trying to think when it was exactly. It must have been early 90s, I think. It's terribly hard to describe a country where the culture is so radically different. Mm-hmm. And being a woman, of course, I feel it more because, of course, I had to be very respectful about what I wore. I mean, I usually am. I'm not somebody who flaunts arms and limbs anyway, fully clothed. But I just knew I had to be respectful, and I knew that there were certain rules that I hadn't known about, that I was told. To never cross a man's path if he was walking this way, not to cross his trajectory, and I can't remember all sorts of rules, and I obeyed all those and had a perfectly lovely time. I'm not saying that it was awful, but there were instances where you'd go, oh, wait a minute, that man's waiting for me to have to stop. This is now getting silly. I remember the walking business and thinking, no, I can't bear this. And then just one horrible, well, it happened a few times in the lift in the hotel. I would be propositioned a lot, asked, what my room number was, etc. Wow. And just purely on the basis that I was a blonde Western woman.
Wow.
And so there were assumptions
that you're up for it, essentially.
Exactly. There were assumptions made about me and my culture that, of course, I found incredibly offensive. But I wasn't going to blame the entire country or the entire population. Of course I wasn't. I'm sure we worked with a lot of very respectful and very lovely people. And I think I've got used to my independence and my unilateral life.
Yeah. It
But
is a tricky one,
in
isn't
the
it?
90s, when it's going through such a period of flux and a huge change, right in the middle of that, it must have been quite an exciting place to be in some ways.
Thrilling. There were thrilling experiences. I mean, you know, like being in the desert at night and watching dung beetles and having tea out in the desert. You know, before it was a touristy thing to do, we were doing it for real. It was stunning. Obviously, camel rides and things that were an adventure rather than a fairground attraction.
Yeah, you're sort of in that period of shift, so it must have been interesting. I mean, I'm fascinated by it.
Yes, but I have no interest in gold or jewellery or buying, so I'm afraid souks weren't for me. They were of interest for one day, and then I'd had enough.
Yes, I visited a few souks as well. They're very, very pushy on you, aren't they? At the souk?
Aren't they? Exactly.
But I would recommend anybody who hasn't been to that sort of area of the world just to go to experience the different culture, really, because it's just it's so different.
Absolutely. And of course, as you rightly know and say, travel makes you understand a country and the world and how it works so much better if you've seen for yourself how people operate. Yeah,
I agree. Well, let's move on from travel to time travel.
I like what you did there.
I'm going to ask you about something that I'm sure you're bored of getting asked about at this point. Doctor Who.
Of course I'm not bored. Of course I'm not.
Would you say that Doctor Who is what you're kind of most known for?
I think probably in the great scheme of things, yes. I don't think I've done anything that's had more attention, as it were. There's things I'm equally as proud of, and there's things I'm equally as excited by. And of course, there's you know, I don't feel my career's over yet. I still feel I have a future, and that there's projects I hope will come on board. But yes, that was a section of my life that I'm very proud of, very excited by. Was thrilled to be part of it, but sadly the only negative thing about it was I had been enjoying it. I had enjoyed watching Christopher Eccleston and David Tennant when it started, and thought, wow, this is great, it's done so well. And so my husband and I would settle down, you know, to watch it avidly and go, whoa, this is fantastic. And then suddenly when I'm in it, that goes out the window. You go, oh, I can't watch this anymore.
You can't watch yourself back.
No, you can't. Well, because, you know, what's the point? All you'd see is just the bits you don't like. No. So I'm afraid I know nothing about Doctor Who now. Isn't that awful? And I feel so bad and disloyal because you know, it was wonderful series. And but yeah, it's broken the bubble for me to be able to watch it.
Well, I mean, let me give a bit of context to the listeners. Obviously, you were part of actually the biggest Doctor Who series to date, the most viewed Doctor Who series to date, Series 4.
Really?
I don't know if you know that. Yeah.
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's the most popular series, alongside David Tennant and Catherine Tate, of course. So, I mean, obviously you understand the history of the show. It's a very rich history. Was there a sort of pressure to get it right, I suppose, when you took on the
Of course, not from anyone else, but on myself. Yeah. Absolutely. As I say, I had been watching, and so I thought all the mothers prior to me were superb, and I thought, good God, I can't top that, and I can't even rival it, you know, let alone top it. And so I didn't know what I was going to bring to the table that was going to be of any use or value. But then, of course, I underestimated Russell T Davies, and you know, he writes like a dream, and it's as if he's got inside your skin and just says, oh, I wonder if, well, there we are, that's what Jax has to offer, we'll just bring out this, that and the other. And so he wrote the most wonderful script for me. I couldn't have been more blessed.
I was going to ask you about Russell, actually. I don't know if you know, but last year he was voted the most influential man in television. Based on It's a Sin, which was, I don't know if you've seen, a wonderful series.
Of course I did. Oh my God. Oh, I've wept buckets.
Heartbreaking. Erin, have you seen It's a Sin?
I have, yeah, and I really enjoyed it. I thought it was fantastic,
Yeah.
and quite shocking in some ways, because I think for people of my generation and Louis' generation, that kind of phenomenon is kind of out of our memory. Well, we didn't live through it, and so having conversations with my parents about it being very much in the cultural mindset at the time, it invited those conversations between members of my family, because obviously it was on during lockdown. And it was fascinating, and it really brought to light some really interesting insights from them too. I think it was a conversation starter, certainly.
Great.
Apart from being a fantastic piece of art.
Yes, yes. Oh, but isn't that superb? I mean, that's what Louis said, that he's just been called what you say, an influencer.
He's been called Radio Times voted him the most influential man in TV. And just for context as well, for anyone who hasn't seen, any listeners who haven't seen it, It's a Sin is a drama about the sort of AIDS epidemic I guess is the word, in the 1980s, and obviously not to spoil anything, but it's truly heartbreaking series. Jax, I think you once said as well, I read a brilliant quote by you, if you have a great writer, you're in safe hands. I take it Russell's a safe pair of hands?
Oh my God, he's safe hands and arms, and you feel enveloped by him, both literally. I mean, I seem to remember having a marvelous couple with him, so in the literal sense, but in the sense of his writing, there was nothing to question, nothing to change, only to find joy, and just, it's so easy when somebody has written something brilliantly. It makes your job easy. You just say the lines. He's done it all.
I mean, even on top of Russell, your kind of co-stars on Doctor Who are like a who's who. I mean, excuse the pun, of sort of brilliant and respected actors. I mean, David Tennant has got to be Britain's biggest TV star. I mean,
absolutely.
What's it like working with him and Catherine Tate and all these kind of really well-regarded?
It's when it's on paper and when it's in theory, you think, oh my God, I'm going to work with David Tennant, and oh my God, I'm going to work with Catherine Tate. And then Bernard Cribbins, please never forget him. And so when it's in theory, my tail was wagging, and I was nervous and thrilled and excited and doing all sorts of backward somersaults. But when it comes to the practice, the practical day of work, you're there to work. You're there to get on with work. You're not there to sit and go, oh, you're David Tennant. He stops becoming David Tennant. He becomes Doctor Who, and Catherine becomes my daughter, and Bernard becomes my father, and then you're talking as people, and you're talking as professional people. And so I'm afraid, that, of course it was fun, and of course it was lovely, and of course it was exciting, but that's not where your focus is when you're working.
And you touched on somebody that I was going to ask you there as well, Bernard Cribbins. I read that you used to spend a lot of time doing crosswords with him on set and sort of having fun with him behind the scenes.
Yes. The brightest, fittest, most clever, silly man. He was a joy, and I just couldn't have loved him more. I couldn't believe it when he said he did crossword puzzles, because that was my thing. And I always used to think, oh, I'll just sit quietly and do a crossword in the corner. But suddenly I had somebody to do it with, which was just lovely. And then we'd race each other to set, and he was just great fun and fascinating, of course, because his life story is amazing. All his military life and his film life and his music and singing and his fishing. He has so many interests. He's riveting.
A very real legend of the game. I think it's fair to say about Mr. Cribbins. I'm going to touch on something that I think is sort of a highlight of your time on the show. This is Turn Left. I'm sure that episode title means a lot to you. I'm gonna give you some facts about Turn Left. I don't know if you know this. It's one of Doctor Who's most popular episodes ever. It's ranked within fans' top 10 Doctor Who stories very frequently. But it also happens to be the episode, and again, I don't know if you know this, but it's the episode that you feature most in terms of screen time across all of your. I imagine you knew that already.
Yeah. I didn't know it was the most popular though. Wow.
Well, yeah, I think, definitely. I think top 10, which is no mean feat for a 60-year-old show.
But like hundreds of episodes.
Hundreds of 900 and something episodes. And there was one critic who specifically praises your depiction of Sylvia's steadily growing depression across the course of the episode, and director Graham Harper even came out and said that the one scene, there's a very famous scene of you sort of staring into space, was Jacqueline's moment, was his lines.
Oh,
so that's
dear.
High praise. When you're making an episode
wonderful.
like that, do you know that that's going to be a classic?
Of course not. I mean, but you're not thinking in those terms. You receive a script, and I already knew that I was working with Russell T, so I knew the script was going to be stunning, and it was stunning. And of course, I was chuffed to bits that I was featuring a bit more in that episode, and so, as I said, all the excitement happens when you get the script and you go, God, this is fabulous. I'm thrilled to bits. But then you get down to the work process, and then you have a marvelous director as well. Of course, I don't mean to miss out Graham, because Graham was excellent, and the best directors bring out the best in their actors. And he came up with lovely camera angles and lovely ideas of where to focus and where to put people. And a great makeup team, and a great, just the whole team. It would be a mistake to start singling people out, but people who were prepared to make it work for the best. And so I mentioned makeup just because it seemed to be a big deal that I wasn't going to wear any makeup, and I don't consider that a big deal. I'm perfectly happy not to wear makeup. I'm not a vain person, but I think Sylvia was seen as a little bit vain, and so it was sort of seen as a big step that she was going to be seen with her face plain.
Well, that is a beautiful scene, the one that that Graham refers to there, where you're sort of staring into space. It's very staring almost at the camera. And one thing that Erin said, because I asked Erin to watch that episode in preparation for our chat, and she said that that episode was remarkably sort of reminiscent of the past 2 years.
Yeah, it's watching it now, it just seems like another, like a parallel universe essentially of the last maybe 5 years of constant problems and global crises and
yes.
war or whatever it might be. It felt very very current in lots of ways,
yes.
even though it's
sadly
more than 10 years old, and very sadly, yes, but it was very interesting to watch it back, because I think I probably watched it when it was on, but I was a child then, so watching it now is a very different experience.
Exactly. Yes. No. That was such a. I mean, amongst his many talents, his one of the clever things that Russell did was write for an audience that could be a child or an adult, and everyone would get something else out of it. And so, of course, the adults watching would either reminisce on real life memories of war or catastrophe, or people aware of what was happening to the planet would be concerned. Everyone, as you say, would have an angle on it. And now, sadly, it's more relevant than ever.
I think it's amazing when a writer can kind of capture an audience from the age of maybe 5 or 6 to, well, and a person, at the very end of their life. Like it's kind of incredible, that ability to be able to capture an audience that's broad in perspective. I think it's massive feat, really.
Yes, isn't it? What a feat! What an achievement! I'm in awe.
I mean, the Doctor Who audience is unlike any other, right? I mean, I knew somebody once who starred in one Doctor Who Big Finish audio, which you're obviously very, very familiar with. Just a sort of guest appearance, maybe 10 minutes, and he received autograph requests for the next 10 years in his mail.
Yeah, I can believe that.
Has it been similar for you?
Oh, I wouldn't say I'm inundated, but at the same time, yes, it sort of carries on. It trickles on. I mean, of course, you can't be anything but grateful that people are still interested. You can't be anything but happy. There's nothing to moan about or complain about. But I'm sometimes mystified. But I'm not at the fact that they love Doctor Who. That's gorgeous. But I'm always mystified as to why they feel contacting me personally is a part of that, because I don't know. I just don't feel I can take any credit, really.
Well, I disagree. I think you created a brilliant character that sort of stuck with people, you know?
That's just very kind and very lovely of people. I mean, I'm just the luckiest person in the world.
Well, I'm going to ask you two more questions about Doctor Who, and then we'll move on. Firstly, I know that Russell T Davies is returning to Doctor Who next year. David Tennant and Catherine Tate also returning. So, I mean, you know what I'm going to ask you. Do you fancy coming back?
Oh, would I ever? That's pie in the sky. You hope for things and wish for things, but the most important thing is to just get on with the present, and consider what's on the table in front of you and what's happening in life right now.
That's a very diplomatic answer, yeah. Because I mean, technically, you know, you have come back already. I mean, your character and Catherine Tate's character were only one-off parts originally, right?
That's right. Yes, we were just a Christmas special, and no one thought that Catherine would agree to come back. You know, she was huge. Well, she still is huge, but she was huge at the time. You know, her first series was mega, and so nobody thought that she would agree to come back and do a whole series. And when she did, I mean, my goodness, I was cock-a-hoop. But then again, you know, that's just luck. I'm on her shirt tails. You know, it's just. If she hadn't agreed, I wouldn't have been back, I'm sure.
Well, that's the bit of luck you need, really, isn't it? I mean, and like you say, absolutely huge name. I mean, she's only just released a movie, hasn't she, this year?
Oh, phenomenal. I haven't seen the film yet, but I saw her on the news being interviewed for the publicity for it, and she had me in stitches. I mean, I was falling off the sofa. I thought she was hysterical.
Very last Doctor Who question I'm going to ask you. Jodie Whittaker has just stepped down as the Doctor. Do you fancy being the Doctor? Do you fancy it?
Well, we've already had the good age thing. Peter Capaldi was a little bit older, so we've had the age issue, and now we've had the female role. So I don't feel I'd be bringing anything special.
I disagree.
But maybe. Oh, bless you. But maybe time to hand it over to somebody that would be bringing something radically different.
You've played some LGBT characters on stage, right? You've played.
Yes,
yeah.
and just my last telly. Yes, I mean, at the moment it seems controversial because I'm a married straight woman, but playing a lesbian to me just seems perfectly normal, perfectly you know, we're telling a love story. I was telling a love story in the play on stage, and I've just played a lesbian on TV in a series called Industry. I'm hugely thrilled that attention has been focused on let's get work for people who haven't been getting work in the past and been ignored. I'm hugely thrilled by that. And I'm excited by the fact that we're thinking differently for roles. You know, initially I had to fight for being seen for roles that were automatically given to men. You know, that was a fight. So often you'd hear from your agent, oh no, that's a male role. And you go, but why can't I be seen for it? There's nothing in there that says he has to be a man.
Well, that, and also actresses having conversations about how, you know, in Hollywood, as soon as a woman hits 40, you know, the roles dry up. And so what you then having stories for women of all ages, I think is a good fight that's been fought.
Of course, yes. And there's going to be fights and there's going to be struggles for all sorts of people for many years to come, I imagine. I don't suppose all sorts of things will change. You know, forever scripts have said when they arrive, or they don't arrive anymore on your doorstep, but they used to, and they used to say scripts, such and such a character arrives, an attractive woman in her 40s or whatever it said, and you'd think, what relevance is attractive? So my role might have been a tax inspector or a police officer or a whatever the role was. So you'd never say Inspector Gently arrives, you know, an attractive man, and you just wouldn't. I mean, even at theatre school, my beloved principal Nat Brenner, who I worshipped, even he took me to one side one day and said, "Jax, I really think you ought to get your teeth straightened and sorted out, because they're not even." And you go, "Well, what on earth has that got to do with the price of soap? I just don't understand this conversation. I'm here to be an actor. I didn't realize this was modeling school. I didn't realize this was supposed to be, and my very first agent, bless her, took hold of my hands and looked at my hands and said, "Oh, I don't know. I don't think you'll get any work as a hand model." I said, "Well, I'm not here to be a bloody hand model. I'm here to be an actor."
It must be terribly frustrating, but I would hope that the industry continues to go in the correct direction and change and hopefully evolve to be the inclusive place that it should be. And changes have occurred, and I hope will continue to do so.
There's been a lot of conversations, thanks to things like social media, about body positivity and that sort of thing in those sorts of industries. And I suppose really, when you think about it, it doesn't make sense, because if everybody on TV has perfect teeth, perfect hair, but they're playing Jane from down the road, that's not accurate, is it? How would you say that sort of social media has impacted the acting world and the sort of TV film industry?
I can't really authoritatively answer this, Louis, because I'm not on any social media.
Right.
And I've always thought, why do I want the opinion of Joe Bloggs as I'm walking down the street? What do I think his politics are? Am I going to stop a total stranger and say, "Hello, should I buy this dress?" I don't. I wish to seek counsel from either my friends or my family or experts in the field if it's a question I need advice on. I want to go to the experts in the field. I don't want to hear the general populace chatting about it. That sounds awful. But there we are.
And there's a lot of negativity on social media. And again, I say, when I was sort of putting some research together for these questions, I found some actually surprisingly lovely things said about you online, Jax. There was some really, really lovely things said about your performance of Sylvia, particularly in Doctor Who. Some nasty things about Sylvia herself.
That's fair enough. Well, that's how I played her. I played her as somebody who wasn't going to be a mother trying to be best friends with her daughter. She was going to be a mother wanting to help her daughter become the best she could be. And so she wasn't going to sit idly by watching her daughter fail and struggle and marry the wrong man and and get involved with strange people. She was going to fight for her daughter to have the life that she wanted for her. There we are.
Well, that's lovely. Let's move on from the Doctor Who chat. You moved on from Britain's biggest drama at the time, Doctor Who, to Britain's biggest soap, Coronation Street, for a few episodes, right?
Oh, it's just a few episodes, yes.
Few episodes, yeah. Do you like just choosing things that are worldwide famous?
Oh, you sound like I have a choice. Honestly, I'm a jobbing actor, Louis, and although there's one or two things I might have said in the past, or I really would rather not do, on the whole, I'm just desperate for anything anybody offers me. If they offer me a job, it's yes, please, thank you very much, I'll do that. And so things aren't on then nothing's offered to me on a plate usually.
So what wouldn't you do?
Realistically, I suppose if something was really diametrically opposed to my way of thinking, but then that's a very hard, again, troubled water scenario, because things should be put out there for people to discuss and debate amongst themselves.
Well, I mean, speaking of politically, you did play Theresa May, didn't you, for a few scenes of a documentary? What was that like?
What was that like? Because that must have been very weird to play someone who is in the media all the time. Happening, essentially. That must have been very strange.
Well, she was Prime Minister at the time. Yeah. And my mother kept saying, have you met her? And sadly, they didn't arrange for a meeting beforehand. But ironically, my mother has now died, and she got to 97, bless her. But she didn't find out that I met Theresa May last summer.
Wow.
I did actually meet her, so that was quite fun. It was just we happened to be at the same concert and we talked to each other.
Did she
which was
recognise
lovely.
you?
No, I had to tell her.
How did she react?
She was gracious. She didn't let on at all whether she'd seen it or not. But the person that she was with had seen it and had been an advisor on the program, so he knew of it very well. Wow. So that was interesting. So it was a fascinating conversation. But yes, no, going back to when I actually did it again, that's something that, you know, I won't make any bones about it. I'm not a Tory. I did not vote Conservative, but I've always felt, get to know things about people before you judge them. And everything I found out about Theresa May was positive. She came across as a very, very committed and hardworking and sincere person. And so that was ammunition enough for me to be able to play her with conviction and with honesty. And with integrity, I hope, rather than pastiche or cartoon or with an opinion.
Because you've got to play her as a real person, and you've got
to
lay aside your image of her that's informed by the media or
exactly
whatever that might be. Yeah.
Yes. And I'm not an impersonator, you know, I'm not, and so I'm blanking on her name, but there was a lovely impressionist doing a very good job of Theresa May at the time, but I wasn't going to go down that road. I just thought that would be awful, because that would go into the realm of pastiche or comedy, which I just didn't want to do.
Is it difficult to play a real person without sort of being an impressionist?
I found that quite hard, because of course the director and people involved with that project wanted me to sound more like her. And so I did struggle a bit. I did struggle a little bit, because I knew I wasn't quite getting the catch in the voice. And when you're inventing your own character, you can be more creative and feel more free with it and more fun. I felt a little bit restricted trying to get that voice, which I don't think I achieved, but there you are. I wasn't, by the time we started filming, I wasn't even thinking about that. I was just thinking about the reality of the situation.
Well, I mean, I do think it's really beautiful that you said that you know, whatever your views were beforehand, you looked into her and you sort of, you found a lot about her, and you kind of grew to like her, because I really do think, I know you're not on social media, but from what I've seen in social media and the growth of social media over the last few years, people tend to read headlines. They sort of see what they want to see, and because social media gives you what they think you're interested in, it's very, very difficult to sway from the opinion that you already have. Because they just
curate your feed around what your opinions are, and so it just tells you what you want to hear rather than any opposing viewpoint. So I think that's interesting that you tried to come to the role with nuance and understanding of she's a real person. She's not just her views or the actions of her party more broadly.
Well, exactly. Yes. I'm sure we're all guilty of it. You know, I'm not going to exempt myself from forming opinions about leaders from the information that we're given, but. Naming no names. But I think before I took any action or made any statement, I would have to know a great deal more. I wouldn't just go on the superficial.
Well, I would like to just move on to a few sort of questions to finish up. I've got a few sort of shorter questions.
Can I ask one?
Yeah, sure.
I spoke to my sister yesterday, and she's interested in getting into theatre production and directing. And so she asked me to ask you, what would your advice be to someone who's just starting out in the industry, in the creative industry, in acting, in directing, in theatre, in film, whatever it might be?
Gosh, I would love to help, Erin. I'd love to be able to tell her exactly what to do, but I'm so out of touch. Because it's so long since I entered the industry, I don't know what the procedure is now. You back in the day, it was work as much as you could in all the provinces and in all the repertory theatres, and just get as much experience under your belt. Do voluntary work, do every role in the theatre, so you understand everybody's job. Don't just direct. Make sure that you've built a set, or you've helped build a set, or that you understand what the problems are with lighting, so that if you do become a director, you're not just shouting at somebody because the lighting's wrong. You have to understand what their job is, or understand what sound's doing, what costume's doing, what the cause and effect of everybody's job is. I think that would, I can certainly hand that over as advice if she wants to go down the direction route, is to just understand everybody's job as best she can. But as far as getting into the industry, I'd love to help. I don't know.
No, that's fair. I think that's fantastic advice. But get as much experience as you can, and I think that probably goes for lots of industries. Actually, try to do a bit of lots of different things so that you appreciate. If one day you're the boss, what other people are doing, so that you can understand their role. I think that's got a lot of value, not just for theatre, but for lots of industries.
You're so right. Yes.
Thank you.
It's very much, it seems to be very much a jack of all trades approach that you're suggesting, because people, there's the famous phrase, of course, jack of all trades, master of none, but people don't realize that the full phrase is jack of all trades, master of none, but oftentimes better than a master of one.
Oh, I didn't know the end of that.
People misinterpret that. So you're suggesting, if I've got this right, that people who are wanting to go into theatre or acting in general should learn each individual part of it so that they can empathise with those different sides of it?
Well, certainly have an understanding of it, even if they don't practically build a set or practically do lighting or sound or costume or makeup. You can tell who has experience and who hasn't when it comes to a technical rehearsal in a play, in a theatre, because actors who have never explored what everybody else is doing muck around and they think, this is great, we don't have to do anything, we're not properly acting now, we're just doing and they misbehave. And I'm sounding like a real old-fashioned fart now, aren't I? I'm really sounding awful. But I sometimes have to, just have a little quiet word and just say, this is not for you. This is for the technical team, and you've got to be much more disciplined. So yeah, I find myself, sounding like a Sylvia.
It helps with being respectful, I think, of other people's roles, definitely.
You bet. You bet.
Well, another question that sort of plays into the advice for young people, because I imagine a lot of the people who will watch this podcast will be interested in going into acting. And of course, you're very well regarded across stage, screen, and of course now audio as well with Big Finish.
Who came in?
But I think people will be interested to know how you switch your approach across each of those different platforms. If at all.
Oh, well, yes, of course you do. Of course you have to. Yes, no, I had been to Bristol Vic, as I said. That was strictly a theatre school at the time. We had no TV training whatsoever. And so my first television, I was really quite inept. It was my second TV. It was a series called Andy Robson. And I was playing a mother, very nervous about her son, and it was a scene to camera. And I was, as you can see, I use my hands a lot. I'm very mobile. And of course I was being told, no, you've got to keep still and you've got to keep focused. And so I was finding this quite hard. And every take we did, there was a sound problem, and it was getting harder and harder to keep still. And this sound problem kept happening. And then finally the sound guy said, look, I really don't know where this sound is coming from, but it's a tapping noise. And it was me. It was my finger had a ring on it because I was a married woman. And I was so tense, my finger was knocking against the table at which I was sitting. And I was all my concentration at staying still had gone into this finger. I had no idea. Pathetic. So yes, different disciplines, hugely different disciplines, and then joyous. With you're mentioning Big Finish, joy to have that, where you can play suddenly any role in the world because nobody can see you. And suddenly you can be from anywhere and you can have any character. I know, it's exciting.
Am I right in thinking you even played God in Big Finish once?
Oh, yes, I did.
I saw that and I was like, wow, she played God. What was that?
Yeah, that went to my head.
I think it would go to anyone's head.
No, it was a fabulous role. I loved that. Yeah, she was a Scot. I think
God was a Scot, obviously.
God, obviously, because Scots are benign and yeah. It seemed to make sense at the time.
Is it difficult acting via audio, because obviously you don't have the same sort of bouncing off the other actors type thing to work with as you
Well,
do?
you do and you don't. If I'm recording books, I record a lot of books. That's hard because you've got the whole world in your head, and so you're just bouncing off yourself, and you've got all your characters and they're speaking to each other, but of course it's all you. It's exhausting, but I love it. I absolutely love it. At Big Finish, we're in sound booths, but you can usually see one or two people. They've usually got glass panels between them. There's another studio that they use, which is more open, and you can stand in a circle and actually have the whole cast together. And so you are genuinely bouncing off each other. I mean, of course, you're concentrating on the script, but you're with the others and you're getting their energy and you're getting their vibe. And I find it very freeing. I love it.
Brilliant. High praise. High praise for Big Finish.
Oh, yeah, no, that's tremendous.
Let me move on to, as I say, to the kind of like last few questions. Just gonna ask you a few more. This one, have you ever seen Rocky?
Yes, the
Yes.
film about boxing. Yes.
Yeah. So one question that I think really tells you a lot about a person is, of course, in every good movie, and Rocky's a good example, there's a turning point. So in Rocky, it's when the montage starts and he starts training. That's the turning point of his life. What was the turning point in your life? When did your life change?
Good question. A dear friend, Graham Callan, was an actor and then became a director. And he was a dear friend, and a lot of my dear friends never ever used me because that's what happens. They just don't see you as an actor. They just see you as a pal. And I never wanted to break those friendships by stepping over the mark and saying, can I be in your play or can I do whatever? And so at the time that he was casting a play, I was decorating his flat. So I was up a ladder painting the ceiling and I had my hair in bunches. I think I'm trying to work out how old I was. Well, I was in my 30s, but I can't remember exactly how old. And he would come in on a daily basis and say, it's a two-hander I'm casting. I can't find the girl. I need a woman who can go from early 20s to 80, and it's 8 scenes. Well, it's 8 scenes, and so it's every decade, these 8 scenes. And so what, I don't know, I just can't find her. I just can't find her. And then finally, on this day when I've had my hair in bunches, he looked up at me and he said, Jax, you can look a little bit younger sometimes, can't you? Gosh. It was like, yeah, thanks, Graham. Yeah, you're really pushing the compliment. But bless him, so that we didn't ruin the friendship. I mean, we absolutely agreed we were going to take this seriously, and so that I had to audition properly with the men that he had lined up, and meet the producer, and go through the whole procedure rigorously, so that there was no question of nepotism. And I got the part. And that was when Alan Ayckbourn's casting agent came down, saw me playing every age from 20 to 80, and said to Alan, I think it's time we had her up in Scarborough.
Wow.
And that, as I said before, that was how everything changed there. Yeah.
That's your Rocky moment. That is your
that was the Rocky moment. Yeah.
What's your dream role?
Oh, always to play something new, always. To not, you know, I've never been somebody who says, oh, I want to play Cleopatra or all the great roles, because I'm petrified of the idea of some wonderful authority sitting in the front row going, oh, I'm sorry, I saw Maggie Smith play this. And there's just no comparison. So I don't want to be compared to anyone. I love the idea of telling a story, as I said earlier. I love the thought that people will be sitting in an audience or at home going, oh, what happens next? Oh, what happens next? I love that idea. And so for me, the dream role is telling a new story, bringing people on a journey. Hopefully they learn something, but if we've just made them laugh, that's fine. If we've helped them escape for a little while from troubles, that's fine. But yeah, take them on a journey.
Lovely, lovely. You have a very poetic way of answering these questions, Jax. You really do. You really do. What is the best role? What's your favourite role you've played so far?
Well, yes, I do. I do have one. It was, and of course, I'm going to forget her name, aren't I? This is terrible. Esmeralda. Oh, this is terrible. Anyway, the play was Spring Storm, Tennessee Williams, and it was discovered after his death. Vanessa Redgrave found a great deal of his plays. He was such a prolific writer, and made sure that the good ones, the ones with promise, were seen by directors. And Laurie Sansom, a magnificent director, knew a lot about Tennessee Williams and knew that these plays should be cut, and knew that Tennessee Williams would have approved of that. And so cut it, shaped it, made it into the most wonderful play. We did it at Northampton and it transferred to the National. And I was just the luckiest girl to play this role, because she was just the most fabulous character, a southern old lady, fretful again over her daughter. Had a great deal of fun with it. And she was just a multi-layered. She had all her poignant moments. She also had her foibles, and she was a snob, and she was petrified. She had every layer. I loved her. I loved playing her.
Let me sort of bring it back now. How important would you say that sort of those communication skills have been in your career and in your life?
I still feel I'm working on that. I still feel I'm desperately inarticulate. But I know that to be able to be heard and to be able to just say something in situations is so important, so important. The mouse that sits in the corner and says nothing is never going to achieve what they need and what they should have. And not only to be able to speak, but to be able to listen. We need to debate, we need to talk, we need to listen, we need to understand. And we can't do that unless we're articulate. If we get into a strop, beat our fists against the table and say, no, it's not fair, that achieves nothing. It achieves nothing. Your voice is heard, but your message isn't put across. And you haven't found out the circumstances, and you haven't found out the wheres and the means and the whys. So we desperately need to learn to talk.
What we do now is, I'm going to spring a surprise on you. We take away those communication skills. So I'm going to ask you some questions, and I'd like you to answer them using only one word.
Okay.
You can take as long as you like to think about it. But yeah, one word only. So firstly, what motivates you?
Hope.
Hope. What scares you?
Hate.
What is the best thing about your career?
Joy.
What is the hardest or the worst thing about your career?
Unemployment.
What is your biggest strength?
Optimism.
What is your biggest weakness?
Laziness.
And the last one-word answer, if I had to press you, what is your favourite medium to act across, stage, screen or audio?
Stage.
stage. Excellent. And the next two questions you can answer with full sentences. Okay, that's the one word answers done. What does the future hold for Jax King? What's next?
I have no clue. I have absolutely no clue. This is the unemployment bit of that answer. That you know, you sit and you hope desperately that the phone's going to ring, and when your agent rings, you do genuinely think my world is going to change tomorrow, because it does. It spins on a sixpence. You can have plans to go camping, or I have plans to go camping. I'm going camping in the Knapp, the Knapp, I think it's called, Valley. It's a wilding experience. It's a you know, a plot of land that's been allowed to go wild to help the environment, and we're going camping.
Beautiful.
But anyway, you can have plans to do that, and then suddenly you have to cancel because something comes up.
Yeah.
But that's exciting. It's frustrating.
Lovely. Well, have fun on that. And before I ask you the very last question, which I like to end on, at the beginning of this sort of podcast, I asked you for your 5 dream dinner guests, and obviously we kind of passed on that. But funnily enough, throughout the course of this interview, you've mentioned 5 people that you've said inspired you. You've specifically used the word inspired with 5 people. And those were Sue Saunders, Dr. Fleer, Alan Ayckbourn, Nat Brenner, and Graham Kellen. So
Alan,
those might just be your 5 dream dinner guests.
that sounds perfect. It sounds gorgeous.
And the very, very last question, and I love to end on this one because it's I think it leaves people with something to think about. It's really your chance to spread some wisdom here. What's one piece of advice that you wish you'd been given when you were younger?
Oh, that's hard. I came up with the dilemma that I may have been given good words of advice myself, but I probably ignored them as a child and did my own thing. So I think the word of wisdom that I could only pass on is find your own path. Don't necessarily feel that the words of wisdom are the only route, but find your own path. That would be my advice. But really want it and work for it. Yeah.
Lovely. Thank you for that, Jax. And thank you for coming on today. Thank you for giving up your time to come on our podcast.
It's so lovely to meet you both.
Yeah.
It's been really nice. Thank you.
So with that said, thank you everybody for watching today. Thank you, Jax, for coming on. And thank you, Erin, as always, for being here alongside me. And we will see you in the next episode.